Now, Star Wars is always going to be one of those subjects that connects people to their past. The first time they watched the movies, the first time they played a Star Wars video game, and Squadrons is no exception. It's an evolution of a great theme from the past. Let's take a look. Star Wars Squadrons is easily among the best examples of what a straight-up space shooter should be. Great action, a good story, and remaining true to the source material. It's something that all of the best Star Wars games have achieved, and it's also an evolution. For me, the best early example of piloting an X-Wing was the arcade scene in the 1980s. The huge cabinet for Star Wars, which is now a classic game. The old vector graphics, which at the time were rather remarkable. And this game saw players embroiled in the original Death Star run. Honestly, for a kid in the 80s, it was an amazing experience and one which I jumped into many times. It was perhaps that which started my fascination with space games, and there's a long list of other games that came after. The Starglider series, for example, with the now iconic Starglider 2 music and of course its famous space whales. Frontier Elite 2 was another standout title for me, and of course the Wing Commander series, along with the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series. Star Wars Squadrons then is standing on very strong foundations, and it's now arguably the first Star Wars game that drops you into the seat of a fighter pilot in such a visceral way. And yes, it does a great job of this on screen, but in VR it's a whole different world. I honestly do feel that there's an important point to make here. On the one hand, there's a Star Wars Squadrons as a game that does a lot of good, but also has some flaws. Then there's Star Wars Squadrons as an experience, and that is the experience of placing you directly into the Star Wars universe. For some people, this experience will be the highlight of the game, maybe the most important part of it, and for other people, this aspect may barely register on their radar. This then will depend on whether you're here for a Star Wars experience, a game, or maybe even a bit of both. Now, I got to admit then that my first impressions were somewhat divided. Sitting in the seat of an X-Wing or a TIE Fighter for the first time in VR is a very distinct experience. All the more so with a HOTAS, and then there is of course the perfect recreation of these ships' iconic sound effects, both in terms of the engine sounds as well as the weapons, so it really does all come together very well. It's extremely well put together. And then there's the gameplay, which actually has taken me a bit of time to get used to. Initially I found it somewhat on the simplistic side, and for the most part this is due to the flight model. I'm under no illusions here though. Star Wars has always been, and likely always will be, planes in space, and that's only right. Expecting Newtonian physics on any level in a Star Wars game would be stupid at best, but stepping aside from that, for me, the flight mechanics never quite fully hit home. Now, with any space game, how the flying feels is key to how well it will resonate with a player. Some space games take the easy route, where the ship is essentially moving in a very simplistic way, and this can be likened to a camera mode in other games. For example, when you go into photo mode and have free control over the camera, so you can basically have 6 degrees of freedom going in any direction. Squadrons certainly isn't that far from it in fact, but it does unfortunately share a few elements with that, and this largely comes down to the way in which the ships accelerate and decelerate. I find Squadrons really struggles to convey any serious sense of motion in regards to this. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this point, as it could easily be the subject for an entire video, and maybe it's something I will deep dive into in the future. For now though, let's just say that my biggest issue is with the stop-start nature of the forward momentum. Overall then, the flight mechanics feel, to me at least, as though they are a little on rails. This is offset by the very nice combat. Now, in terms of the single player element, that's the story mode, the combat shares a lot with what I would be willing to argue is one of the best space combat games of all time, Free Space 2. Now, Free Space 2, of course, is a very old title at this point, released all the way back in 1999. Yet for its time, it was not only a great graphical achievement, but also an amazing game in its own right. So much so in fact that over the years it has remained a firm favourite of space fans, spawning many mods and complete overhauls. One of the best overhauls was Battlestar Galactica Diaspora, which I highly recommend. For me then, Squadrons fits very much into this vein. It's an evolution of those old titles, taking what worked from them and improving upon them. It's actually nice to see, to be honest, after EA messing up the Star Wars games so badly in recent years. It's also nice to see them being willing to publish a game like this. Now, talking of EA, they recently discussed both DLC as well as Oculus Quest support. Both of these are kind of on the not so great side. Currently, EA have no DLC planned for Squadrons, and this is kind of good in one way, as it means the game as it stands right now is complete, which is kind of refreshing from EA. That said, it would also be nice to see new campaigns at some point, so I do suspect EA will reserve that for sequels maybe. On a standalone version of Squadrons for the Oculus Quest, EA have again said that there are no plans for that. Whether the Quest would be capable of this is perhaps another matter, although I suspect the Quest 2 could perhaps achieve it in some form. So, there we have it, my early initial thoughts and impressions on Star Wars Squadrons. If I can find the time, I'd like to upload a VR mission playthrough at some point. Let me know if this is something you would like to see. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.